Alright guys, new day. So in this one I'm not gonna make anything, but I'm just gonna show you a kind of checklist. What are the things that you should do when you're rendering with Evee. As you know, Cycles is great and it creates really incredible results, but it takes hours to render a production type render. But especially if you're using a laptop like me, frankly not all of us can afford a really heavy build PC. So we have to use Evee, but Evee can sometimes make you throw up like that. So as you can see, when I switch to Evee right now, and I have set up a really basic scene, just a sunlight from above and three statues and windows here on either side. So that's not a very photorealistic result, and you might think that I should just move back to Cycles and you know wait for hours to render an animation, and I'll just have to bear with it, right? But no, Evee can also create really powerful results. All you have to do is just a little bit of work and check some things and add some things to make it look realistic, and in the end it will look just almost as great as Cycles, not as accurate, but it will prove great results. So that's what we're gonna do in this one. Okay, so I have switched to Evee, and all of the things that we're gonna do here are here. Okay, so first things first, you will see something called ambient occlusion. You will check it, and it instantly makes the look of the scene even better than before. What it did was just it added some of the uh, basic shadow type black shadows on places that there should be shadows, because the meshes are really close to each other, so there would be a shadow that is in the real world that is caused by the ambient light. So you will see that in the ambient occlusion settings you will see something called distance. Okay, if you increase this, then you will see that the shadow is more uh, more effective, and it's going all over the place. So you might want to keep it variable as according to your scene. If you are just rendering something uh, let me say just like a tiny something, so then you will have to decrease the ambient so that it suits that kind of shot. But if you're suppose rendering out a scene of buildings, then you will have to increase the distance, because then the scene has become bigger, and then you will have to increase the amount of shadows. Okay, so keep it variable, keep it changing, and you will be good. So I'm just gonna keep it at 1 meter about. Alright, not so much. Alright, so after this you have something called bloom. Okay, if you check this, you will see that your scene looks good. It looks, oh, thank you for that. It looks that was my phone. So it looks really good. It kind of adds a glowing effect, and you can have it if you want. But if you are planning to do a post process step, then I suggest that you turn it off, because then you can control the amount of bloom later on when you have rendered out your images. But either way, it's really good to have, and I think you should keep it checked if you're just doing a quick animation. And next thing is depth of field will be something set by the camera, so I'm just not gonna go into too much deep of that. Just check it and set the distance. But for a wide shot like this, I don't think you will need this. Next we have surface scattering. This is a thing that you can see on organic materials like skin or bread or something like that. In solid materials, like this is a statue, so this is made of plaster or something like that. So this will not have surface scattering because it's not a soft material. Alright, next is screen space reflections. This is a really really crucial thing to have, and you should keep it checked. And you can see that it made our scene look even better. What it did was it added some of the reflections on where there should be reflections of course. So that's what it did. And for the glass materials, all right, this is where you might have some troubles setting up the glass in Evee, because it doesn't work the way you imagine it. um, so for this you have to check four things. Okay, first is screen space reflections. All right, it will add some reflections on this. I have a basic glass material on that. Okay, just let me just add a glass shader and use that instead. Okay, now once you have enabled screen space reflections, you can see that it creates reflection, but it doesn't show us what's behind it like a glass would. And the reason for that is refraction is not really possible, because it's a ray traced um, feature, but it can be mimicked. Alright, so then you have to check refraction. Alright, and nothing will happen, because you have to check two things more. First is when you go to the glass material, you will have to go down into settings and set the blend mode to alpha blend, and then you have to enable screen space refraction. Now it will show you what's behind it. And even then you will have to you know, change some settings here and there, but the way is that, okay, you have to check all those things for it to work. All right, next is, okay, how have I done that in all of them? All right, so next is motion blur. It's the motion blur in Evee is a really tricky thing. It will not create a motion blur for something, for anything that's happening in front of camera. It will only create motion blur when the camera itself is moving. So for example, if I have the camera set up and something like a Superman flies like whoosh, so it will not create any motion blur on that. But if everything is still and I just animate the camera forward, it will create motion blur on that, because the camera itself is moving. So keep in mind. And then we have volumetrics. All right, volumetrics are a great thing to have. You should always have volumetrics, even though if it's an indoor scene or an outdoor scene, especially in an outdoor scene. um, in in an indoor scene, you can see in the real world, when the sun is coming from the windows, you can see the lines of the rays that are coming in. So that's because of volumetrics, because your room has dust or smoke particles in that, so that scatters light and you can see that. So you have to check volumetric lighting. It will be checked by default, so don't worry about it. For it to work, you will have to set up a volumetric, which is just basically any mesh which has a volume shader, volume scatter shader in its volume input. All right, so no surface shader. All right, you will have to disable any surface shader, and then in the volume input you will have to create a volume scatter or principal volume, or okay, stuff like that. Then you'll have to check the density. Let me just volumetric lighting, and there you go. See, look how beautiful it looks with volumetrics. You can see some of the lights. It's without it and with it. So keep that in mind. Always use volumetrics in your scene. It will make them look even better. Then what do we have? Also enable volumetric shadows, if so that if something is uh, in the middle of the sun rays, it will create kind of shadow that you would expect. And that's it for the volumetrics. And next is we have indirect shadows. Sorry. Shadows, if you see that we have some really weird shadows thing going on because it has soft shadows turned on. You can turn it off, it will improve your performance. But and it even makes sense in a scene like a sunlight, because sunlight is harsh. So keep that in mind. You can use soft shadows and make it look like, so that the viewer doesn't really pay that much attention to it. So just keep that in mind. I'm gonna use soft shadows for this. If you want, you can increase the cube size and cascade size. What this will do is it will remove the jagged effect that you would expect when you have kind of this, right? It will make it more accurate, but that's all up to you. And then we have indirect lighting. All right, uh, cycles is something that uh, calculates bounce lights. Okay, so for example, if the sunlight hits here, it will then bounce off and hit here and here and here, and then and it will light up the scene accordingly. So but in Evee there is no bounce lighting, and you will see the color of the HDRI as if it's lit by an HDRI. But the influence of HDRI shouldn't happen inside a room. All right, it should stay dark. So for that to happen, you will have to bake indirect lighting, and now for that we are going to use light probes. All right, so you have to set up all three of these are just if you make a cube map, a reflection cube map, it will come as a sphere. You can, if you are using it for a room, you can just go to its properties, and instead of type sphere, you can just use type box and set it up as the size of your room. All right, next is irradiance volume, and it will calculate bounce lights, not bounce light actually, but it will just make your room look like it should be, not as accurately, but you can sometimes have problems. All right, and for its resolution, if for a small room like this, you should I don't know, make it 8 by 8 and by 8, and that's it. And all right, and I have all of those set up. And one more thing, for reflective things like this glass, you should have a reflection plane, and just put it onto the glass, really, like I just put it on the glass and scale it up, you can see what is happening, right? So I'll just move it so that we can see all those reflections. It shows us the correct reflections that you should see on a reflective material. Alright, so I also have all of those set up as well. Now once you set up all of them, just go to indirect lighting and hit bake, and it will take some time and it will bake it, and I will be back as soon as it has done that. Alright, so it has done baking, and look at that, right? It looks really good. So one thing to take away from this video is that you should always bake indirect lighting and use light probes. Okay, now one other thing that I like to do is, oh sorry, I didn't set up my reflection plane on that, sorry. and same for here. And keep in mind that the arrow is facing the right way, which should be inwards into the room. Alright, so that's how we go, even though it doesn't have an effect, uh, but you should always do correct things for your renders, and especially if you're doing an animation. Now, the last thing I like to do is, even though it has created some indirect lighting for over here, now I would like to just set up a really basic light, which is an area light. Okay, and it should be pointing upwards, so it will just mimic the kind of uh, bounce light that you would see in a cycles render. Alright, I'll just increase the strength. Alright, and make it a little yellowish color. Alright, now that looks like a cycles render, wouldn't you agree? Excluding this type of shadowy, but these shadows will be enhanced in a final render. You can see now I think we are done. Okay, in the color management, this will really help you in when you're setting up your lighting. Okay, uh, you should always keep it on filmic. It will be by default, don't worry about it, but you can set it to false color, and you can see how much the light is affecting the room. Alright, we can see that it after calculating the bounce lights, it has done really pretty stuff. But here it is red, so it's almost the uh, the extreme end of the exposure of Blender. Alright, because after this, if I even increase the light coming up from above, it will increase this red and it will go to the whitish hue, obviously. But after that, you can't see any details in this region because it has so much light that it's almost white. Alright, so you can see the gray areas are correctly exposed areas. Alright, these are like well balanced exposures. Alright, green is good, everything is good. You should always check if you are exceeding the red, or that depends on your creativity. You can exceed the red, that's not a rule, but you can just quickly, really easily see what's happening in your scene, how the light is being affected. Alright, so that's it, guys. I will just show you how the renders have improved. Alright, so I have made the initial and final renders. So this is when we started Evee. It was it was hell. It was like a kid just drew all over the place, and it's like we are on the look dev mode, which was in 2.79, but it looks really horrible. The only thing that looks good on this is the lighting on these statues and some of the shadows, but none other than that. It's just horrible. Look at that. Look at those dark, really patchy. What is that, right? It's actually being caused by our sunlight, right? It's behaving as if the sunlight is just above and not below, which is obviously true, but it doesn't have any bounce light, especially. But that was the that was the initial render, and it was horrible. Then after we did all of our stuff, we made this. Holy guacamole, this is something that is really good, right? Like look at those lights coming out of um, look at that bounce light, right? We made a separate light for that, and the ambient occlusion. It's like these are artifacts caused by the irradiance volume, oh sorry, irradiance light probe, but I think it looks good. In these cases you might have to increase the resolution where we set it at 8. You might have to increase and move it up or down just a bit and bake it time to time, uh, and then it will be better. But I think for the time being that looks awesome, guys, right? um, Now, thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned a lot. If you like this video, please hit like, obviously. But and if you're if you're hearing to this stuttery English of mine first time, then I suggest you subscribe. I will keep making these kind of videos. I'm just a bit preoccupied right now because I'm just doing my own project right now, and even that is what inspired me to do this, because I'm doing my project in Evee. Alright, I'm just like you. If you're using a laptop and you don't have the money for a really heavy to build PC, for a gaming PC, which is essentially what you need to make really good renders. But so so I just have to use Evee for that. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.